Hey, it's Chris Chico, and in this video, I'm going to prove to you that virtual wholesaling is easier when you are launching a new market with Facebook ads as opposed to any other method, including direct mail and cold calling. And I have my trusty clipboard here, and that's because if the reason why this is an important video is because if you're starting a brand new market with virtual wholesaling, and virtual wholesaling is the term that I invented back in 2000, and I actually started doing virtual wholesaling back in 2000 and 5 or 6, maybe 7. And then I invented the term. So that term didn't exist until I created it. And virtual wholesaling is the art of going out and taking wholesaling and doing it virtually. And virtually could mean a variety of different things. In this context that we're speaking about here, we're talking about virtual wholesaling in the context of going out into a brand new market. And how do you go out and you find motivated sellers and you find deals that then you can make a profit from? And there's a variety of different ways to do that. And you want to make sure that if you are starting a virtual wholesaling market, that you give yourself the best chance possible for success. That means minimizing your risk, increasing your chances for success, and most importantly, iterating. Because with everything you do, even though you might be following my plan, even though you might be following a proven framework that you're for implementing this, at the end of the day, you have to be willing to and be open to making adjustments. And the ability to do that also depends on what you're using, right? Because some things have a longer. It's like it's as if you were if you had a battleship, right? In order to take that battleship and turn it around and move it in a different direction, it takes a lot of work. If you were in a jet ski, then you can do all that, right? And not that you would want to do all that, but you know what I mean. So that's what I'm talking about here. So now I've got my notes here on my other phone here. I've got two phones. I always say that a man who has two phones is a man that has two phones. That's a bad joke. All right, so let's now. First of all, a couple of things I did not cover in this video. Number one is I'm not covering RVM, which is ringless voicemail. I don't cover that because I don't do that. I don't. That's in Florida they passed a law that makes that illegal, and a lot of other states are following suit on that. So I don't think that's a good strategy. I also don't cover mass texting, where you get a group of people that you skip trace and you're going to text them. Now, there's software available for that kind of circumvents and makes it legal for you to do that. And so some people might argue and say, Chico, it is 100% legal, right? There's no issues with that. And yes, it's correct. However, it doesn't mean that somebody can't sue you, right? Because in law, it doesn't matter whether or not you're right or wrong. It matters who has the best lawyers. And if somebody is really out to get you and they want to sue you for something, and even though you might be innocent, yes, you can prove your innocence in a court of law, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. And then you might end up just saying, you know what, I'll pay you X amount of money to go away. So those are the two strategies that I don't in any way use and or talk about because I just don't like them. And I don't like the thought of agencies with badges showing up at my house or getting legal notices from attorneys. All right, so that's it. Now, also the minimum criteria is 50 leads. So with any of these strategies, I'm assuming that you're going to go out and you're going to generate 50 leads, at least at the minimum, in order to make an analysis and have an understanding of, okay, yeah, this is a good market. It's not a good market. It's giving me signs, etc. And that's what we're going to be discussing here today. So let's talk about direct mail. And direct mail is something that I have been known for a very long time. In fact, you may have seen this postcard, my property notification postcard. Yeah, and similar ones. And I started using postcards in direct mail back in 2003. I mean, it was nice back then. There was nobody mailing. I was the only one mailing. And we made a lot of money with that, but it's now since become more saturated. And so then now I've put this little diagram here, and this talks about the strategy here, talks about the money that we are going to have to spend to implement that strategy, the time it takes, and then the risk. And I just thought about something in order to make this more interesting. I need color markers. All right, so I need a table to put that in. Yes, despite all my technical prowess, this is the mode that I like best. So let's talk about direct mail. Now, the negative with direct mail right now is that you've got to spend a lot of money to make that work. And if you are going to go into, and I should do a video about this, because a lot of times, many times you might want to implement a strategy, but you may not realize the extent to which that strategy requires your effort, time, money, etc., in order for it to be successful. So let's say, for example, that you're going to do direct mail and you said, well, I got a budget of $500 and I got to make it work with $500. And then you're trying to do direct mail, trying to send out to absentee owners. I would say don't implement that strategy, because you don't have enough money to sustain the amount of mail that needs to be put out in order to give yourself a chance for success. So that's the other thing you have to always be thinking about. So with direct mail, if you're going to do direct mail, my recommendation is you're going to spend a minimum of $2,000 to $3,000 a month at a minimum for the next 2 to 3 months in order to be able to have a chance for success. That is a must. If you're not willing to do that, then I would suggest you pick out a different strategy. Now, so in terms of money, and you know what, I forgot. I should have had another column here for the tech stuff, but I am going to put here another column here, and we'll call this tech. Okay, so in terms of direct mail. Actually, you know what? I messed up. I was supposed to discuss cold calling first, and I discussed direct mail first. But that's okay. You'll forgive me for that. Direct mail. So in terms of direct mail, let's think about this. Direct mail, in terms of the money, it's a big risk, because you've got to put in a lot of money in order to be able to make that work. Now, in terms of time, direct mail is great. Why? Because you can just go out and pay for the mail to go out, and then you're gonna have leads coming in, and all you got to do is now worry about handling those leads. So in terms of the automation, once it's up and running, then direct mail is great. Now in terms of risk, I think that the risk is high, because you've got to put in a lot of money in order to be able to do that. And in terms of tech, also, with direct mail, I think that the risk is not the risk, but rather it's a lot of work. And the reason for that is that in order to get a couple of things. In order to get direct mail work, you've got to have the right postcard. You have to have the right CRM. You got to put that in place. You got to have the right phone system, and you got to configure all that to make sure that it works properly, make sure that the leads are being funneled appropriately, et cetera, et cetera. So that requires a bit of technical know-how, and you're putting a lot of money at risk. So you got to be careful and make sure that that is correct, because if you make a mistake, then all of a sudden the amount of money that you're spending here is going to be you're going to end up losing it. Also, direct mail has a long iteration time, and that is really on the risk side in that you got to get certain things right. And so then you send out the mail, you do everything right. Let's say it takes you a week, then you mail out the postcards, and then now you wait another week, and then finally you get the calls, and then finally then you speak with the sellers, and you're 3 to 4 weeks out before you have enough data in order to make a decision about, hey, is this working or not working? So the time, right, is very long with regards to iteration in terms of when you're going to get some feedback, a feedback loop, in order for you to be able to know, hey, is this a viable market or not? Is this a viable market or not, etc. All right, so then that is, now if you're stubborn, if you really, really are stubborn, you say, Chico, I don't care what you say, I still want to do direct mail. I recommend that at least mail this postcard, right, to a tax delinquent list or a vacant list. If you want to copy this postcard, you can go to chrischico.com/postcard, chrischico.com/postcard, and you can mail that postcard if you want. Now, here's the deal. Let's talk about cold calling. Now, cold calling is cheaper than direct mail. So I'm going to put a positive on that, right? Okay. I don't want you to think I'm being biased. A positive on that in terms of the actual cost. Now, keep in mind is that there are some costs, right? You still have to buy the list. You have to skip trace the list. You're going to need a dialer, Mojo. If you don't want to, if you're going to call enough people, you can't just call them from your phone. I mean, it'll take you forever. So you need a dialer to be able to do that. So that is one of the items related to the cold calling. Now, in terms of the negative is that it does require a considerable amount of time. So let's say that you're going to spend, I would say an average of an hour and a half to be able to find yourself a reasonable lead, a seller that says, yes, I'm interested in receiving an offer on my property. So if you're spending an hour and a half on a dialer, and if you want 50 leads, and we're talking about 75 hours. Think about that, 75 hours on the phone cold calling. Damn, that sounds tough. Sounds like what they do to they should make the prisoners of war do that. They talk right away. So time is an issue, right? All right, so time is an issue. Oh my God, these things smell so bad. Time is an issue. Risk. In terms of risk, there's no monetary risk, but I'm going to put a question mark here, because I think that there is a risk with the fact that if you are cold calling, you have to be able to scrub your list. They recommend, okay, let me go back. You have to scrub your list. You should scrub the list against the do not call list. However, if you scrub your list against the do not call list, you're going to lose 40% of your list. So most investors that do cold calling, they don't scrub their list. Keep that between you and I, okay? I don't cold call, but I'm just saying. Okay, so let's say that you completely ignore that and you say, screw it, Chico, I'm going to call those people. Now you've got another thing that you have to scrub the list against, which is the known litigator list. This is a list of prospects that have been shown to sue in court people for violating the law related to calling it, etc. Now I can't think of it now. I haven't had enough coffee. So you have to worry about that. Now the interesting thing is that I've gone out and I tested this, like 3 different vendors, gotten the known litigator list. I scrubbed my list, and each known litigator list has there's a little bit of overlap, but they all have different phone numbers. So even that's a little bit problematic. So I think that there's a bit of risk involved. There may not be a monetary risk to the extent that direct mail has, but certainly there is a risk factor with regards to the legality of it. All right. Now, in terms of tech, I think that the tech is a little bit easier to handle. So I'm going to put a check mark here for tech, in the sense that you got to get the dialer up and running. And so you can use, if you're using Mojo Dialer, you can use that in order to be able to make the calls, and you don't necessarily have to do. You could use that particular system, and it has a built-in CRM, and you just use that to follow up on people and make calls, etc. And you upload your list. It's relatively easy. Certainly a lot easier than, say, trying to implement direct mail. All right. And so now the big negative for me is that, man, I don't like to be on the phone that much. And the thought of for cold calling, spending 75 hours in order to now keep in mind is that assumes that you have, say, 3 hours a day or 4 hours a day. If you work a full-time job and you're 9 to 5, and then you come home and then you're expecting to do cold calling, that's a tough thing, because now you've got a very short period of time in order to not only do your cold calling, but in addition to that, you got to follow up with leads. And then you got to figure out the time zone differences, right? Because, hypothetically, like, for example, if you're in California, you're not going to cold call people in the East Coast, because by the time you get home from work, 5 o'clock, it's already 8 o'clock, it's already too late. Now, if you're in the East Coast, you can certainly cold call better if you're in Miami and say you wanted to cold call Phoenix. I'm not saying you should do cold calling in Phoenix, but I'm just using that as an example. Then it's easier, right, because of the time zone. So those are things you have to keep in mind. But in general, I think what I find difficult with that is the time and the work in terms of making all those cold calls. Now let's talk about Facebook ads for motivated sellers. And let's talk about the first item, which is the money. Now, with regards to Facebook ads, it is a lot less money to get started, and also you are able to iterate and get a feedback loop much faster with Facebook ads than you would any other method. So for example, with direct mail, if you're sending out direct mail, then you're going to have to send out 2, 3, 4, 5,000 postcards, provided again you have the right list and you have the right postcard and all those things are correct. You have to send out that many postcards in order to get feedback and know, is this list working? Am I getting the right leads? Am I getting the right prospects? Does this campaign have a chance of working? With Facebook, you would start off spending, let's say you start off spending $50 a day. You spend $50 a day for 3 days. That's $150. In that time period, you're going to have feedback to know, am I getting the right calls? Are these the right leads? Am I getting any calls at all? Do I need to make any adjustments? And the only way that you would ever get to spending $500 a month on Facebook, $1,000 a month on Facebook, $1,500, $2,000 a month on Facebook is that you have spent $100, $150, and you got success. You spent $400, and then you go and you spend a little bit more, and you spend a little bit more. So the only reason you would ever get to spending a lot of money on Facebook is that you spent a little bit of money and you've got great results, and now you continue to spend. And that's a great thing about Facebook ads, is that in terms of money, right, there's a lot less risk involved. Now let's talk about time. Now time is also a plus. Why is the time is a plus? And I think that Facebook ads is actually the best strategy if you have a full-time job, because of the fact that, you know, it's like with direct mail. With direct mail and Facebook, you are paying for your leads. So when you're paying for your leads, you don't have to spend, you know, the 70 plus hours cold calling to get 50 leads. You can buy your leads. And that's why I like that. I've always been, there's a lot of different guys out there teaching a bunch of different strategies. Back in the day, cold calling wasn't really something that was really big. But in terms of, for me, I've always been, never done a ton of driving for dollars. I've never done any sort of free method. I've always been of the mindset of, I want to create a system that automatically, predictably is able to bring me leads, and I'm going to go ahead and then work to convert those leads. Now let's talk about risk. With regards to risk, I would say Facebook is also, at the same time, not a risky proposition. And the reason for that is the fact that, not a whole lot of money to invest in terms of getting that channel up and running and getting it tested, and in terms of time, all right. But risk itself, I look at risk more from the standpoint of the tech and the money, meaning that if you spend a lot of money with direct mail, you got to spend a lot of money. You got to make sure all the tech is done correctly, because then otherwise, if you mail out, and this has happened to me, you mail out 2,000 postcards and you realize, oh man, the phone system wasn't set up properly. The phone number was incorrect on the postcard. You ever had that? I've had that happen to me. And so all of a sudden now you got to scratch it and begin. If you make a mistake here on Facebook, right, you can adjust it really quickly within the day. So you may only lose 20, 30 bucks. If something isn't working, you adjust it. And so that's why I think that with Facebook is also a plus. And so that's why I believe that if you're going to go into a market, with regards to Facebook, if you're going to go into a market, a virtual wholesaling market, I think that Facebook is the absolute best way to get started. Now, I have a training. A couple of things. So I have there's some videos on the channel here, and I'll put at the end, I'll put the links in the description here. There's videos on the channel that walk you through specifically how to do Facebook ads, and I'll make a comment here to Justin to make sure the cards are here. There are videos here that show you how to do Facebook ads, and will kind of get you started. I do have a training that's more in depth. It isn't like this big, long, drawn-out sales pitch. Meaning that if you watch the training, you could really understand everything in terms of how I do Facebook ads. And of course, we always have paid training available. But I've had people that have taken my free training here on YouTube on Facebook ads, have implemented it, have seen that, oh my God, this stuff really works, Chico, and have said, you know what, Chico, I want your help, because if I can do this just with the free stuff you gave me, imagine what I could do with your help. I think that you should be on Facebook. Okay, regardless, even if you think, Chico, I think you're full of crap. I think you're one-sided. I know what you're doing, Chico. You're engineering this thing so that at the end, you get all greens down here. And, it's like a big propaganda machine, Chico. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But think of it this way. Here's what you have to consider. That no matter what you see here, and whether or not you think I'm being one-sided or not, the fact of the matter is that you have to be online. You have to go out and get your customers online. You have to, we had a client recently, Bo, who did his first deal with Facebook ads, and the person who answered his ad was an 85-year-old woman. An 85-year-old woman that found him on Facebook. And when he went there, she had all these letters and postcards from other real estate investors, and he got the deal. She never responded to anyone, but he was able to get to her and be able to successfully do a deal. Why? Because she was online. There was no competition. So I definitely think that you should be incorporating Facebook ads. Facebook ads. Well, I definitely think that you should be incorporating online marketing. I think that Facebook is the easiest way to get started. SEO is very slow. PPC is very expensive and very risky. So it's the most difficult thing to get started. Facebook ads, that's what I recommend. And again, as always, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, make a comment, let me know if this video was useful. If you have any other questions about this, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. And I'll talk to you soon.